Chapter 1104. After careful calculation, Li Yi and Rui had been in Xianxia for a long time. They came here 2 months before the Spring Festival and went back to Rui City for the New Year. Just after the Lantern Festival they came to Xianxia again. Previously he was worried that Yang Liuqing and the others would not be able to carry out all aspects of work smoothly after they took over Xianxia. After such a long time of learning, she had a clear understanding of the revolutionary routine. Since she could be a good leader, Li Yi had nothing to worry about. With old Yang and Su watching over her, Li Yi no longer had any concerns about her safety. After staying in Xianxia for a few more days, it was the day of departure that Li Yi and Rui had discussed. Zuemo and Li Mu were still waiting for them in Rui City, so it was not good for them to stay in Xianxia for a long time. Moreover, the Wu Kingdom's worries were gone, and there would not be any problems in the following development. Li Yi had no reason to stay here. Senior sister, goodbye. Li Duan sat in the carriage, lifted the curtain, and waved at Yang Liuqing vigorously. Yang Liuqing was his senior sister in name, but in fact she was half his master. Rui only spanked him when he was disobedient, and the usual teaching was done by Yang Liuqing. Rui and Ruoqing got on the carriage and Mississippi Lu, Bai Su and Yang Liuqing talked. Bai Su was not the #1 master under Mississippi Lu, but she did grow the fastest. Whether it was martial arts or broad-mindedness, she was deeply trusted by Mississippi Lu. It was not too much to call Bai Su her right-hand man. Senior Tian still needed a long time to recuperate, but small-scale activities were not a problem. She stood with Su and saw them off. I'll look for you after she recovers. Su took a few steps forward and said. Then he lowered his voice so that only he and Li Yi could hear and whispered, if there's any news about Taoist nun, send me a letter immediately. Actually, he did not have to speak so softly. Senior Tian's body had not yet recovered, so he could not hear what he said. Li Yi looked at him and said, before I leave, I want to teach you one last principle. Su nodded and pretended to listen attentively. Whatever Li Yi taught him, he followed it as a philosophy of life. Never trust others unconditionally. A smile appeared on Li Yi's face as he said, except for yourself. A puzzled look appeared on Su's face. What do you mean? Li Yi patted him on the shoulder and said with a smile, don't worry. If there's any news about Taoist nun, I'll send you a letter immediately. Li Yi did not deliberately lower his voice, so it was clear. When he felt a sharp gaze behind him which made his back feel a little cold, Su finally understood what Li Yi wanted to teach him. He narrowed his eyes and gritted his teeth. I'll remember it. When Li Yi turned around and was about to leave, he clearly saw that the old man named Xuanhuan let out a sigh of relief. He wanted to tell him that he was thinking too much and that he had no interest in the Yang family's Wu Kingdom at all. But after thinking about it, he gave up. He liked to guess, so let him keep guessing. He waved to the crowd, and when he turned around again, a voice came from behind him. Uncle. He turned around and saw Yang Liuqing coming over. Yang Liuqing walked to Li Yi's side, looked at him and asked, Uncle, I don't know when we can meet again after this farewell. Can I hug you? Not far behind her, Yang Wanli's body stiffened and his face changed greatly. Li Yi was also taken aback. Then he smiled and opened his arms. Yang Liuqing paused for a moment, then took a step forward and gave him a light hug. They separated as soon as they touched. A smile bloomed on her face as she waved her hand. Martial aunt, goodbye, goodbye. Li Yi waved and got on the carriage. Bai Su walked out from behind Yang Liuqing and looked at her with a hint of teasing on her face. She said, our otherworldly empress, which man do you want to deal with that mandarin duck handkerchief? She whispered in her ear and walked to the carriage with her hands behind her back. Then she turned around and waved. Let's go. The group of carriages moved further and further away. Yang Wanli's face was as black as charcoal. Su Tian, come in with me. Senior Tian looked at Su Tian, then turned around and walked back to his room. Little brat. Su sighed softly and followed in with his head lowered. Yang Liuqing watched the carriages go away. After a long time, she let out a sigh of relief. When she turned around, her aura was completely different. She looked at Wei Liang and Qin Qing standing behind her and said, send a letter to the provincial governors of Su Prefecture and Qin Prefecture. I will only give them 3 days to consider. If they don't surrender in 3 days, they won't have the chance to surrender anymore. Wei Liang knelt on one knee and cupped his fists. Understood. It had been a few days since Li Yi returned to Rui City. Rui Zuemo, and even his godmother felt that Xianxia was a place of slaughter. Countless souls had died on the battlefield, so they didn't want Li Mu and Yongning to stay there for long. After not seeing him for a few months, little Li Mu really missed him. She even wanted to sleep with him. It was said that daughters and fathers were close, and this was true. This matter made Xuemo very jealous. After all, she was the one who gave birth to Li Mu and had always been by her side. Seeing how close she was to Li Yi, she could only call her Little Heartless. Li Mu, who was about to be 1 year old, could already say words like father and mother. Under Xuemo's guidance, she could also say some other words. The rest of the credit belonged to Yongning, who watched her and talked to her all day. At 11 years old, Yongning no longer looked like the little girl with dementia 5 or 6 years ago. When Li Yi first saw Xianxia, she was probably her age. She was his aunt and also the king of the children in the family. The person Li Duan admired the most was her because her martial arts were better than Li Duan's, and she would play with him. There were no peers around him, and the one who was the youngest than him was his aunt. Li Duan was talking to Li Mu at the side. Xiaomu, when you are a little older, brother can play with you. You have to grow up quickly. When you grow up, Xiaonyang will come to see you, Li Mu giggled. Xiaonyang? Li Yi sat in the yard, drinking the grape wine that Xiaozhu had made for a long time. Unfortunately, there was no one to drink with him. Fang could barely be considered half a companion, but he was busy with other things these days. He was about to go on a long journey, and he didn't know how long he would be gone this time. Naturally, there were a lot of things to prepare. Rui was also very busy recently. Before she left, she needed to pick some people to go with her, and the matters in the league had to be arranged properly. Bai Su also liked to drink, and as her chest became more and more erect, her attitude towards him became better and better. Unfortunately, she followed behind Mississippi Lu all day long, and Li really couldn't find anyone for a while. He sighed and raised the wine cup. Halfway through, he suddenly put it down and lightly slapped his palm behind him. The two palms collided, and Li Yi felt as if his palm had fallen into a ball of cotton, unable to advance or retreat. In just an instant he understood two things. First, the other party had no ill intentions. Second, the other party's strength was far superior to his, and it could even be said to be heaven and earth apart. A sinister voice came from behind him. Not bad, I haven't seen you for a few years, and you haven't slacked off in martial arts. The voice was very familiar, but he hadn't heard it for a few years. Li Yi was stunned for a moment, and the next moment, a smile appeared on his face. He looked at Fang, who had just walked into the yard, and laughed loudly. Bring the wine, the strongest kind. Chapter 1105. Chang was a man who always spoke in a gloomy way and had a deadpan face, which made him very unpopular. His name was enough to make countless officials and nobles in the capital tremble with fear. Ordinary people might not have heard of Manager Chang, but in the rich and powerful families, his name could stop children from crying at night. Li Yi had never felt so close to this deadpan face as he did now. Fang brought the strongest wine in the mansion. It was not the kind of wine that was distilled by industrial distillation. It was the first batch of wine officially brewed after the improvement of the process. I've been to a lot of places and drunk a lot of wine in the past few years. Your wine is the best to my taste. No wonder His Majesty couldn't forget it. Chang didn't drink like Fang and the others who drank with their heads raised. After drinking, a small part of the wine was spilled on his neck and body. He drank cup by cup and sometimes he savored it carefully. He didn't waste a drop. He had followed the former emperor for most of his life, so he always talked about him. After drinking a few cups, Li slowed down and asked, "Where have you been these years?" Chang refilled his cup and said, "Everywhere north and south of the Yangtze River. His Majesty had a wish when he was alive. He wanted to go to every state and every county in the Jing Kingdom. His Majesty is gone, so only I can fulfill his wish." The former emperor once said that he wanted to go to every state and every county in the Jing Kingdom, so Chang's footprints had been to every state and every county in the Jing Kingdom. With such a loyal servant, the former emperor's spirit in heaven should be very happy. Li took a sip of wine and asked, "What's your plan next?" "The world is so big, but this is the only place that is interesting. I plan to stay here and teach a few disciples. I'll enjoy a few years of peace and happiness. What do you think, Your Highness King Jing?" What was there to think about? Li agreed with both hands and feet. Chang was a guru and one of the best among the gurus. He was as rare as the feathers of a phoenix or the horns of a qilin. Compared to a guru, the national first-class protected animals paled in comparison. Once old Tian recovered from his injuries, and with the addition of Su, Li counted with his fingers, it would be incredible. If he could also capture old Taoist Yuan, their family would have the 5 unparalleled masters. This was not even considering second great-uncle or Rui, who was half a step into Grandmaster. In the future we can turn Rui City into a retirement home for the Grandmasters. High benefits and pensions will provide a strong guarantee for these lonely old heroes in their later years. We welcome all the grandmasters to settle down here, Grandpa Chang. Yongning ran over from afar with a smile on her face. Her voice was crisp and filled with joy. Your Highness Yongning. Changde looked at her and revealed a rare smile. Your Highness has grown so tall in just a few years. Li Duan followed behind Yongning. He had seen Chang when he was young. However, he was too young at that time and probably did not have much of a memory of him now. He looked at him curiously. This is your duenna, isn't it? Changde grabbed his arm and squeezed it. He nodded and said, his foundation is not bad. He's a good seedling for martial arts. He extended his hand and searched Li Duan's body from head to toe. When his hand reached his crotch, Li Duan finally could not help but run away. He hid behind Yongning and looked at Changde with fear in his eyes. Not bad, not bad. Chang repeated the word not bad a few times. This was extremely rare. Dragons would give birth to dragons and phoenixes would give birth to phoenixes. Rui had broken through to Grandmaster at a young age. Naturally, her son would not be bad either. Su had also said that his son's foundation was very good and much better than his father's. During this period, under the awe of Mississippi Lu, he had been exceptionally diligent in his cultivation. Rui and Su would often give him pointers. There was no shortage of grandmasters around him. His future achievements would not be too low. Chang looked at him and said, I have never accepted a disciple in my life. I don't want my martial arts to be lost. Your son has a good aptitude. It won't be a disgrace to my name if I accept him as my disciple. What do you think? It was naturally good to have a grandmaster as a disciple. However, Su had also expressed the intention to accept Li Duan as a disciple when he was a little older. Li Yi hesitated for a moment and asked, Master? I don't need to purify my body, right? Li Duan tugged at Yongning's sleeve curiously and asked, Little ant, what is purifying my body? Yongning shook her head and said, I don't know either. Li Yi carried Li Duan over and whispered something in his ear. Li Duan's eyes widened. He jumped down from his legs and ran outside quickly. He was a man. Only those with a small penis were men. He did not want to cut it off. Even if this old man was very powerful, even if he was more powerful than his aunt, he would not cut it off. Li Yi watched him run out and said, Su has the same idea. Let's wait for Li Duan to grow up a little. That Su guy? Chang frowned and said, That Su guy's martial arts are lousy. How can he be compared to me? Li Yi knew about the grudge between Su and Chang. A few years ago, he had personally witnessed the battle that involved a man's pride. That battle ended in a draw. Since then, Su had been looking for trouble at second great-uncle's place every day. He was no longer the Su Tian from 3 years ago. Chang had been touring the world these few years. He did not know if he had achieved a breakthrough. He did not have the heart to tell Chang that Su was different from him now. He was old and had a sunset glow. When Elder Tian recovered, the two grandmasters would join forces and teach him a lesson in a matter of minutes. If old Yang's love-hate gay friend was added to the equation, Chang's chances of winning were close to zero. Changde looked at Yongning, who was chasing after Li Duan, and nodded. He said, You have taken good care of Her Highness Yongning these few years. You did not let His Majesty down. Li Yi cupped his hands. It's my duty, but what about Her Highness Emingzu and Shanning? Changde changed the topic. He furrowed his brows and asked, You left them in the capital for many years while you enjoyed yourself here. What did you promise His Majesty back then? Li Yi opened his mouth. This was a question that could not be answered in a few words. He paused, then said, That's why I said that Li Xian is really not a good person. The previous emperor passed the throne to him, but he left everything to Emingzu. Is there any emperor like this? You were the one who promised the previous emperor. Come, let's drink. Don't change the topic. Let's get drunk. It had been a long time since Li Yi had gotten drunk. Under Chang's questioning, he held the jar of wine and gulped down a few mouthfuls. He immediately became drunk. My head is so dizzy. He shook his head and stood up. He waved his hand toward the other side of the courtyard and said, Xuanhuan, help me to rest. The servant girl quickly ran over and put Li Yi's arm on her shoulder. She helped him walk into the room. Li Yi was really drunk. He took off his shoes, laid on the bed with his clothes on, and quickly fell asleep. Xuanhuan fetched some hot water, wetted the cloth, and wrung it dry. She carefully wiped his face and palm. She had done this action countless times and could control her strength very well. Even in his sleep, a comfortable expression appeared on Li Yi's face. After she finished wiping Li Yi's face and palm, she put the cloth back into the basin, covered him with the blanket and quietly left. When she reached the door, she turned her head back and looked at the figure lying on the bed. Her gaze was somewhat confused and dim. After a long time she turned and left, leaving behind only a faint sigh. Chapter 1106. The difference between a good wine and a bad wine was the taste and the headache after a hangover. The wine he drank with Chang yesterday was his treasure. He didn't even want to let Xiao Zhu experiment with it. When he woke up in the morning he only had a slight headache. Xuanhuan wet the towel and walked over to help him wipe his face. Li Yi took the towel from her hand and said, "I'll do it myself." He wiped his face. Xuanhuan took the towel from his hand and put it back in the basin. She turned and walked out. When he put on his clothes and got out of bed, he felt that something was wrong. It wasn't the first time he had this feeling. Ever since he came back from Cangzhou, he felt that something was different. But when he thought about it carefully, he couldn't remember what it was. He sat at the table and frowned. This feeling made him very uncomfortable. He woke up late this morning. Rui and the others had already finished breakfast. Xuanhuan brought the heated food in, put it on the table and walked out. Li picked up the chopsticks. Halfway through, his expression froze. He knew where the difference came from. Quiet, too quiet. In the past, when he woke up, Xuanhuan would stand by the bed and hand him a towel. When he wiped his face, she would tell him about the new things that happened between the maids and the fu. When he ate, Xuanhuan would sit beside him or across from him. She would hold her chin with one hand or both hands and watch him eat in a daze. When he found out, she would smile foolishly and her eyes curved into crescent moons. When he was writing in the study, she stood by the side to grind the ink. After she was done, she walked behind him, put her hands behind her back and tiptoed to see what he was writing, even though she didn't recognize many of the words. Not anymore. She would still hand him a hot towel in the morning, but she wouldn't sit across from him when he ate. When he was in the study, she would grind the ink and leave by herself for fear of disturbing him. Several times, Li Yi saw her sitting alone in the courtyard in a daze. Xuanhuan used to be in a daze, but it was rare for her to be in a daze for several hours like recently. Li Yi felt a little guilty. Ever since he arrived in Xuzhou 3 years ago, he had been tossing and turning in the chaotic land and the Wu kingdom. He rarely had any free time. She loved to listen to him tell stories. How long had it been since he last sat in the courtyard and let her massage his shoulders while he told her a story? It was so long ago that he could no longer remember it clearly. Xuanhuan's significance to him was irreplaceable. Xiao Chui could not, Xiao Zhu could not, even Rui and Rui could not. When he first came to this world, when he was at his most hesitant and helpless, the one who was always by his side was actually not Rui, nor was it Rui. The Xuanhuan at that time was still a silly and adorable little maid, only knew how to circle around him, liked to listen to his stories, liked to eat the food he cooked. She was always chattering and seemed to have endless things to say. When did she become so reticent? Rui walked in from outside and sat beside him. She said softly, "Hubby." Li raised his head. She looked over and asked, "Hubby, do you know what day it is tomorrow?" March 21st. March 21st was not his and Rui's wedding anniversary, nor was it Rui's birthday, nor was it Rui's birthday. March 21st was Xuanhuan's birthday. Li Yi's face was full of regret. If it wasn't for Rui's reminder, he actually forgot about Xuanhuan's birthday. Rui saw the expression on his face and knew that he had remembered. She looked at him and said softly, "After this birthday, Xuanhuan will be 20 years old." Li Yi sighed softly, "Little maid has grown up. Xuanhuan is concubine's Tongfang maid." Concubine knows hubby felt that Xuanhuan was too young, but after today she will be 20 years old. If a Tongfang maid is not a Tongfang maid, she will be an ordinary maid. Others might not dare to say it openly, but what would they think of her? Rui looked at him, shook her head and said, "These things Xuanhuan will not tell hubby. Hubby yourself will not think of it." Li Yi's eyes were slightly dazed. In his memory, the little maid was always that little maid with 2 buns or a bun on her head, swaying around in front of him. He did not realize that Li Duan was already 4 years old. Yongning had already grown into a young lady. In a few more months, even if it was measured by the future generation standards, Xianning would be considered an adult. Little maid actually was not a little maid for a long time. Xiao Chui had just coaxed Li Mu to sleep and walked back to the courtyard that belonged to her, Xiao Zhu and Xuanhuan. Xiao Zhu was packing things in the room. She walked in to take a look and came out again. She asked Xuanhuan, who was sitting in the courtyard in confusion, "Xuanhuan, we will be leaving in a few days. Why haven't you packed yet? What are you doing here, eating melon seeds?" "Young master likes to eat, but he doesn't like to eat. I am peeling some for young master." Xuanhuan turned around and smiled. "You guys pack first. I have nothing to pack. I will be done an hour before we leave." Xiao Chui looked at the bowl of melon seeds in front of her and her scratched fingers. She grabbed Xiao Chui's hand and said angrily, "Are you stupid? Your hand is already like this, why are you still peeling?" Xuanhuan pulled her hand back, her eyes curved, smiled and said, "It's okay, you?" Although Xuanhuan was usually so gentle, but when it came to things Xiao Chui could never be stubborn. She went back to the room angrily, looked outside and said discontentedly, "You say, why is this girl so stubborn?" Xiao Zhu came over, sighed and said, "She is stubborn for a long time. Instead of worrying about Xuanhuan, it is better to worry about ourselves. Xuanhuan is much luckier than us. Did you guys hear, Prince and Princess are going out again? I heard from Sister Xiao Zhu and Sister Xiao Chui. This time they will be out for a long time. I really envy Sister Xiao Zhu and Sister Xiao Chui. They follow second madam and third madam, they bring them everywhere. They are the servant girls of second madam and third madam, they will serve them in bed in the future. They are not the same as us." "That is not necessarily true. Look at Sister Xuanhuan, she is the princess's servant girl, she has been with Prince for a long time, she has not been taken in as a concubine yet. You guys guess, could it be that Prince does not like her?" "I think it is possible. Xuanhuan is not like Sister Xiao Zhu and Sister Xiao Chui, she looks silly, how could Prince like her?" You shut up. There was Jiang of Silla in the capital, Jiang of Silla in Rui City, and Jiang of Silla in Shu province. When he left the capital he left some servant girls to look after the house, took some with him and left some in Shu province. In Rui City the servant girls in the house, only a few had been by his side since he was in the capital, the rest were new recruits. The one who spoke harshly at this time was a servant girl called Xiao Qing. When she was in the capital she worked in the prince's house, and in this Rui City she was also the head servant of the house, a small housekeeper. Among the servant girls her position was only below that of Xuanhuan and the other two. At this moment her face was full of anger. Looking at the two chatting servant girls she said angrily, "What have I usually taught you? Is this something you can say?" Perhaps it was because Xiao Qing's usual amiable image had been deeply ingrained in people's hearts. One of the servant girls pouted and said, "Sister Xiao Qing, we are not wrong. That's right, that Xuanhuan looks silly." The other person also chimed in. "You." Xiao Qing raised her eyebrows and was about to reprimand, but suddenly looked behind the crowd, bowed and said, "Prince?" Li looked indifferently at the two servant girls in the crowd, waved his hand and said, "Pack your things today, go back to where you came from." The two of them paled and knelt on the ground with a thud. "Prince?" Li waved his hand. "Let's go before I change my mind." Hearing this, the two of them trembled and broke out in a cold sweat, immediately got up and left in a hurry. The other servant girls' faces were also slightly pale. They knew that when Prince said that he did not change his mind, he did not mean that he would forgive them. Criticizing behind their backs was a big taboo for them as servants in those big clans. It was a taboo. No one expected that Prince, who was usually amiable and did not speak harshly to anyone, would be so angry just because they said a few bad words about Miss Xuanhuan. Li glanced at the maidservants. Although his gaze was gentle, everyone shuddered when they thought of the two sentences he had said in such a calm manner. Third year of Jingping, 21st of March. This was a very ordinary day. Li sat in the study looking at a map of the Qi kingdom. Xuanhuan pushed the door open and came in, placed a small bag on the table and said softly, "Young master, I peeled some melon seeds, there is no skin, you should eat it soon, it will not taste good after a long time." "Okay." Li nodded. "Young master, remember to eat, I will go down first." Xuanhuan smiled sweetly, turned around, a trace of undetectable disappointment appearing on her face. This trace of disappointment quickly turned into a smile. She sniffed and walked out of the study. She only took one step and then she could not take another step. Because Li grabbed her hand. Chapter 1107. Son-in-law. Her small hand was held tightly by a big hand. Xuanhuan's body trembled. She turned around and looked at him in a daze. In the past at Willow Leaf Village, when they went up the mountain to pick wild vegetables, hunt rabbits, catch pheasants, when she could not walk down the mountain, son-in-law would carry her on his back. When she fell asleep listening to stories, son-in-law would carry her back to their room to sleep. Son-in-law had not held her hand for a very, very long time. Li looked at her hand. The originally slender and white fingers had many scratches. The smooth nails also had many small nicks from wear and tear. Li used both hands to hold her hand, softly said, "Why are you so silly?" Her eyes curved again. Two dimples appeared at the corner of her mouth. Softly said, "Son-in-law, Xuanhuan is not silly, Xuanhuan is willing." Li pulled her over, let her sit on his lap, embraced her, softly said, "It is all son-in-law's fault." A little panic appeared on Xuanhuan's face. Quickly said, "Son-in-law treats Xuanhuan the best." Even Li himself felt that he was not a good person. He had neglected her during this period of time. She was still defending him at this time and even said that she was not silly. Li Yi scratched her nose, said, "Let's go, son-in-law will cook longevity noodles for you." A bright light suddenly flashed in Xuanhuan's bright big eyes, then her nose turned sour. "Son-in-law still remembers? Let's go." Li Yi held her hand, walked towards the small kitchen. A very very long time ago the family of four in Willow Leaf Village, when he was not the county lieutenant, not the county marquis, not the golden Ziguang Lu Dafu, and not the Jiang of Silla, the things he had to do every day was nothing more than teaching, cooking, teasing the little servant girls. At that time he was not that familiar with Rui, nor was he that familiar with Rui. The only person he could talk to every day was Xuanhuan. She would be with the group of naughty children and listen to his story of the 3 white bone spirits. After school she would help him wash and cut vegetables. Even if she could not do anything, she would wander around and listen to his stories of strange things. The cooking method of longevity noodles was very simple. There were noodles, vegetables, and eggs. What Xuanhuan could do was to light the fire. Her favorite thing to do was to light the fire. She sat by the stove and poked her head out to take a look. She said, "Young master, 1 egg is enough. I can't eat 2. There's no reason to put only 1 egg in the longevity noodles. You have to put 2, not 1 more, not 1 less." Li didn't look back and continued to work. A look of interest appeared on the maid's pretty face as she asked, "Son-in-law, why is that?" Li explained, "There's a reason for this." From Li's point of view, as the flames flickered, the little servant girl was in the depths of the smoke. The flickering smoke made her pretty face look even more delicate and beautiful. This was the first time fireworks were set off on a large scale in Rui City. Countless people walked out of their homes and went to their courtyards and streets to look at the night sky in the distance. After a brief daze they began to cheer and shout. The entire Rui City was in an uproar at this moment. The fireworks lasted for a full quarter of an hour before gradually dying out. In the night sky only the 4 words happiness, longevity, health and peace were left, lingering for a long time. Xuanhuan looked at the 4 words. After a long time she came back to her senses. Looking at Li Yi, her eyes were moist and her lips parted. "Son-in-law," Li Yi walked over and helped her wipe the tears off her face. He smiled and said, "Don't cry, everyone is waiting for you, everyone." Rui and Rui walked in from outside the courtyard. Rui hugged her and patted her head. "Our Xuanhuan has grown up." Mississippi Lu gave her a sword. It was custom made for her and had her name on it. Everyone in the Li family practiced martial arts. Xuanhuan was no exception. With so many experts teaching her, she might look weak, but she could beat Li Xian's lousy martial arts. Xiao Chui and Xiao Zhu also sent gifts. The 3 of them were as close as sisters. Naturally they couldn't be left out. Even Li Duan had a gift. It was a small person that he had carved with a knife. Although it couldn't be seen that it was a small person, it was still a token of his heart. The people in and out of Rui City might not know whose birthday was on the 21st of March, but they would always remember this day. Because every year on the 21st of March, there would be a grand fireworks display in Rui City. Imperceptibly, it had become a tradition in Rui City. That night they played very late in the room. When Xiao Zhu and Xiao Chui left, Xuanhuan had already fallen asleep on the table. Li walked into the room and gently carried her. When he walked to the bedside before he put her down, he saw the little servant girl's eyelashes tremble slightly. Li didn't put her down. He sat on the bedside with her in his arms. He lowered his head to look at her. After a long time he moved closer to her ear and whispered, "If you don't wake up, I'm going to leave." Xuanhuan's eyes opened immediately. Her face was red. She whispered, "Son-in-law." Li hugged her tightly. Xuanhuan said in an even lower voice, "Son-in-law, can you stay a little longer?" Li kissed her forehead gently. He whispered, "I won't leave today." He felt the body in his arms tremble. Xuanhuan raised her head to look at him, her eyes quickly filled with tears. She hugged Li tightly and leaned her head on his shoulder. She sobbed, "Son-in-law Xuanhuan. Xuanhuan has waited for you for a long time." Chapter 1108. Did you see it last night? That firework was so beautiful. What firework? I went to bed early last night. I don't know. That's a pity. The firework last night lasted for more than a quarter of an hour. There were even words in the sky at the end. Anyway, I've never seen such fireworks in my life. Wait, who dares to set off fireworks in the city? Aren't they afraid of being locked up in a small dark room? Who dares to lock the prince in a small dark room? I heard that those words were something like Fu Shou. I don't know whose birthday it was yesterday. It's too extravagant. Early in the morning in the city of Rui, People were talking non-stop. Most of the topics were about the fireworks show last night. In the small courtyard, Xiao Zhu finished washing up. When she was about to pour water, she looked at Xiao Cui, who was brushing her teeth with green salt. She wondered, strange, why is Xuanhuan not up today? Isn't she usually the most diligent? Xiao Cui said vaguely while brushing her teeth, I don't know. Maybe she was too tired last night. This silly girl, she thought that young master had forgotten about her. Xiao Zhu shook her head. Her face was filled with envy. She said, the fireworks last night were so beautiful. Creak. Behind the two of them, a door opened and Xuanhuan walked out. Hey Xuanhuan, you, clang. Xiao Zhu didn't have time to pour away the washing water. The basin and water fell to the ground, making a clear sound. Her feet were wet, but she was oblivious, her eyes staring at Xuanhuan, or more accurately, staring at her hair that was coiled up high. Xiao Cui also stared at her in a daze. The toothbrush in her hand had already fallen to the ground. Her arms were still moving back and forth. There was a kind of sadness in this world. It was called, when you still had two buns, your sisters who were younger than you already had their hair coiled up. They had been left far behind by their peers and then mercilessly abandoned. They suddenly felt a little sad. Xiao Zhu picked up the copper basin. Xiao Cui picked up the toothbrush and silently walked back to the room. Xuanhuan looked at them, blushing. She whispered, You, fourth madam, let us be quiet. The two turned around and said in unison. Li Duan, who was only 4 years old, still didn't understand some things. For example, he couldn't understand why he had to call Aunt Zumo and Ruoqing Aunt at first, but later on he had to call them mother. He also couldn't understand why Aunt Ruoqing had to call them mother in the future. If he didn't understand, he would ask. That was why he came to ask Li Yi. This. Li Yi thought for a moment, patted his head and said, Children should be obedient, don't ask so many questions. A child's curiosity was very strong. Li Yi's answer obviously did not satisfy Li Duan. He thought for a moment and his eyes turned. Suddenly he said, Father, I know. Is it true that we call them auntie first, then mother? Li Yi nodded. Li Duan would understand these things in the future. As long as he answered him perfunctorily now, it would be fine if he didn't run over and ask questions. Then when should I call auntie mother? Li Duan's face revealed a look of anticipation. He asked, if auntie becomes mother, will she still spank me? If auntie became mother, would she still spank him? Even Li Yi himself didn't have that confidence. Li Yi looked at him and said seriously, You can't call her that. If you do, auntie will spank you until your butt blossoms. Li Duan didn't dare to ask any more. He ran out of the courtyard planning to ask auntie. Auntie treated him the best. She wouldn't lie to him, and she even brought him out to play and gave him delicious food. Other than his parents, grandmother and Xiaonyang, auntie was the person who treated him the best. He ran into a small courtyard and saw a white-haired old man standing in the courtyard. His expression changed and he ran out quickly. He was only halfway when he was picked up. Changde looked at him and said with a smile, Little guy, your father couldn't escape from me back then. Be a good boy and learn from me. My kung fu is much better than that Su guy. Li Duan kept struggling in the air and shouted, I won't cut it, I won't cut it, I won't learn your kung fu. Chang insisted on taking Li Duan as his disciple and Li Yi didn't stop him. It was his good fortune to have a grandmaster willing to pass on his lifelong knowledge to him. Anyway, Chang didn't understand the Bixia swordplay and the sunflower manual. Li Duan was the young master of the Li family, and he would have to bear many responsibilities in the future. Before that, he must first have a strong body. Xuanhuan, who had already tied up her hair, was teasing Li Mu. Compared to yesterday, although her identity and status had changed, but why did it look like it was just a change of hairstyle? She didn't let Li Yi arrange a maid for her, and still helped him wash and live every day. Although the chatterbox Xuanhuan of the past had disappeared from his memory forever, there was always a smile on her face, and she didn't stare blankly for a whole day like before. The little maid had grown up and some memories were probably completely sealed in his mind. People had to grow up, this was inevitable. These years he had seen Xuanhuan, Shaning, Yongning, Li Duan and even Rui grow up. Even Li Yi himself, whether in appearance or mentality, had changed a lot. Many things had changed. The simple and honest Fang Laosan had left, and Rui hadn't changed in these years. Drunk Emo and Ruoqing had come to his side, and even the otherworldly Mississippi Lu had learned to cook. Of course, there were some things that didn't change. For second granduncle, these years were just like changing a rocking chair and sleeping a few times. Chapter 1109. A long time ago, Li Yi had been planning a long journey. Since the early years of Jinghe, for a long period of time, their family of four had been focused on survival. At that time he had introduced candied hawthorns, strong liquor, and Rui Do only because he wanted his family to have enough to eat, live in a big house and not have to worry about their livelihood. Later, when he came to the capital, whether it was to promote various reforms in the Jing kingdom or to help Emmingzi build momentum, they were all half-heartedly welcomed. In fact, it had nothing to do with him. Not long ago he helped Yang Liuqing to rebel. Although there was a small, almost negligible, subjective factor in it, it was not closely related to him. Li Yi felt that he was not even as good as Fang. In the summer of the early years of Jing, Fang once told him that his dream was to have a beautiful wife and a big house. A long time ago his dream came true. Although his wife was not beautiful enough and his concubines were not beautiful enough, the house was big enough, and he had achieved his life goal. What about himself? Thinking about it carefully, Li Yi did not know what his dream was from the beginning to the end. He did not know before and he did not know now. In terms of status and power, he had already reached the peak of what an ordinary person could achieve. If he wanted to take another step forward, he would have to rebel and become the emperor. It was impossible for him to become the emperor of the Jing kingdom. It was even more impossible for him to become the emperor of the Wu kingdom, the Qi kingdom, and the Zhao kingdom. He really had no interest in becoming the emperor. Having reached this step, he did not want to go any further. In terms of family, his wife and concubines were beautiful. Some were gentle like water and some were passionate like fire. The family was harmonious and the husband and wife were harmonious. Except that sometimes his waist was weak, he had no other shortcomings. In terms of personal strength, he still had his goal. He did not want to dominate the martial arts world, and he did not expect to surpass Rui in his lifetime. He only wanted to become a guru before Rui and Emmingzi, and teach them how to be a qualified sister-in-law and a qualified princess. It was a pity that this was his only dream and it was hopeless. Rui and Mingzhu's breakthrough depended on luck, but he depended on fate. Therefore he could only pursue other things. For example, when they were free they could walk out of Wishful Wool City, out of the Jing nation and go to other places on this continent to have a look. That way his trip here would not be in vain. Jingping 3rd year. Warren 7th year. Xuanhuan 27th year. July. Li Xian walked out of his room and scratched his messy hair. Last night, he had pulled an all-nighter to correct a few parameters. He then sent someone to the Academy of Engineering for further adjustments. Li Yi did not send him a red barbarian cannon, but he did send him a blueprint. After some modifications by the Academy of Science, the range and accuracy of the cannon had been improved slightly. Even after a sleepless night, he still looked full of energy. He laid down on the rocking chair outside and took out a letter from his bosom. He muttered, "I can't believe he ran so fast. I wanted to go out incognito again." He received this letter 2 months ago. At that time, Li Yi and his family had left to travel. He had not received any letters in the past few months. He did not say where they went, nor did he say when they would be back. He took the letter back, feeling empty in his heart. He sighed and murmured, "When will these days come to an end?" A figure ran from afar. When he ran to Li Xian, he stopped and said respectfully, "Brother." Li Xian looked at him and asked, "Going to the Women's Academy again?" Li Han said sternly, "Royal sister asked me to train those mathematics teachers." Li Xian waved his hand and said, "Don't use this reason every time. I know you are looking for the girl called Duan Wu. I have said many times that a gentleman wants a fair lady. It's nothing." Li Han's face turned red. At 16 years old, he was only half a head shorter than Li Xian. A few years ago he was a fatty who was extremely afraid of mathematics. Now he had become a handsome young man. Li Xian changed the topic. He looked at him and suddenly asked, "Little Han, you are already 16 years old this year, right?" Li Han nodded. Li Xian thought for a moment and said, 16 isn't young anymore. According to the marriage laws of the Jing kingdom, it's a suitable age for marriage. Your mother has already mentioned it to me many times. It's time to arrange a marriage for you and wait 2 years before you get married. I think that Lady Duan Wu looks very delicate and pretty, and her family background is also clean. Her family background isn't that much different now." A hint of joy appeared on Li Han's face. He forcefully suppressed the excitement in his heart. Li Xian shook his head at this time and said, "But Duan Wu is Li Yi's cousin and Li Yi is your teacher. In between there is a difference in seniority. This is not right, not right. I think you should choose a girl from the Wang family or the Yang family to be your princess." Li Han was stunned for a moment and his face began to turn pale. Li Xian stood up from the rocking chair and said, "However, if you really like that girl Duan Wu, it's fine. I can help you." But before that you have to promise me something first. On this side, Li Xian and Li Han seemed to have entered into some kind of secret discussion. On the other side of the lake, the girl holding the sword knocked away the wooden sword in the hands of another girl. She nodded and said, "It's better than a few days ago." Again. The girl picked up the wooden sword and rushed over again. The clothes of the two figures fluttered in the wind. Their postures were beautiful and pleasing to the eye. On the side of the lake, two women looked over. On the left, a woman wearing a phoenix coronet withdrew her gaze from the two girls and looked at the other person next to her and said, "In the blink of an eye, Xianxia has grown so big. If I remember correctly, after this year she will be 18, right?" The woman on the right who looked younger nodded and said, "Sister remembers correctly. This year Bingning is already 18 years old. Time makes people grow old. Now even Bingning has grown up. It seems that we are really old." The woman who was already the Empress Dowager sighed and said, "It's time to find a good husband for her. I'll ask Xian to pay more attention to see if there are any young talents in the capital city who are worthy of her." Concubine Yin shook her head and looked at the girl on the lawn and said, "Your Majesty is busy every day. Don't worry too much. Bingning, it's not time yet." The 3rd year of Jingping in the Jing Kingdom was the 7th year of Warren in the Wu Kingdom and the 27th year of Xuanhuan in the Qi Kingdom. This year, for the Jing Kingdom, was a year of recuperation and continued growth. In the past few years, the people's taxes had been reduced again and again, but the national treasury was increasingly full. The agriculture and commerce went hand in hand, and the country's military strength was even more powerful. It seemed to be suppressing the Qi Kingdom and becoming the leader of all countries. Compared with the Jing Kingdom, the situation in the Wu Kingdom had changed dramatically. At the beginning of the 7th year of Warren, eldest Princess Duanrong made a strong comeback and seized 6 provinces, including Cangzhou, Nanzhou, and Linzhou. Later, several provinces surrendered voluntarily. In the past 6 months they had been recuperating and developing steadily. In a short time, they had taken over 17 provinces, which was almost half of the provinces controlled by the imperial court of the Wu Kingdom. In the 8th month of the 7th year of Warren, when Princess Duanrong had taken over 20 provinces, the imperial court finally realized that Princess Duanrong and the others had the strength to overthrow them. On the 13th of the 8th month, the Wu Emperor issued another decree. He would personally lead an army of 200,000 to suppress the rebels. On the 14th of the 8th month, the Wu Emperor was assassinated in the palace. Several ministers rebelled. Fortunately, the other guards fought each other to the death. Although they killed the assassins, the Wu Emperor was also seriously injured. On the 15th of the 8th month, during the morning court session, a eunuch sent word that the Wu Emperor's personal expedition was cancelled. In the 27th year of the Xuanhuan era, this year, the Qi Kingdom was not as peaceful as the Jing Kingdom. There was no turmoil like in the Wu Kingdom, and the Emperor did not go on 2 consecutive personal expeditions. The Emperor of the Qi Kingdom's health was deteriorating, but he was still far from death. The 2 princes were still fighting for the throne with all their might. The ministers in the imperial court were divided into 2 factions, neither giving way. The dispute was almost white-hot. In the autumn of the 27th year of the Xuanhuan era in the Qi Kingdom, Lin Yong strode into a small courtyard. Before he arrived, his voice reached the courtyard. "Miss, they'll be here soon." Chapter 11:10. Goodbye, Shopkeeper Lin. We'll leave this batch of goods to Shopkeeper Lin. If Shopkeeper Lin comes to Liuzhou in the future, please send someone to inform us. We'll have to rely on him in the future. A few stewards walked out of the courtyard and turned around to greet a woman. Although the person in front of them was a woman, she was known as the Hua Mulan of the business world. Not only was she outstanding in appearance, but her ability was also not to be underestimated. In a short span of 4 years, she was able to turn a small clan that could not be shown in public into a giant in the business world. Even those rich and powerful clans that had hundreds of years of history could not be compared to them. Of course, part of this was due to her heaven-defying background, but the role of this woman called Lin Wanru could not be ignored. They did not expect to be able to hitch a ride on the Lin family's wagon. They just wanted to pick up the leftovers. It was enough for the family to take a small step forward in Liuzhou. "We are businessmen. It's always mutually beneficial. You're welcome." Lin Wanru nodded. She did not show any enthusiasm, but she did not alienate them either. "Then we'll take our leave." The few of them chatted for a while more before leaving. When Lin Wanru walked back to her room, Lin Yong walked in quickly from outside. Lin Yong's face was filled with joy. He quickly said, "Miss, the Li brothers have written again." Lin Wanru nodded. She did not have any expression on her face. She said, "Put it down. I'll check the accounts first. I'll look at it later." "Oh." Lin Yong responded and put the letter on the table. He sat on a chair on the other side, poured himself a cup of tea and drank it leisurely. Every time Brother Li wrote a letter, the young miss would always have this indifferent expression. It looked like she didn't care at all, but the young miss shouldn't think that he, Lin Yong, was stupid. After all, he had watched the young miss grow up. Some of her thoughts could not be hidden from him. She kept every letter from the Li brothers. Whenever she had time, she would take them out and read them. She even imitated his handwriting. She thought that she did not know, but in fact, Xiaoer had told her everything. The more she pretended to be normal, the more abnormal she was. This was not a good thing. She would be 23 this year and she had no idea at all. She was a 23-year-old girl, and some of her children were about to be engaged. If the Li brothers came and she was still like this, she would not be able to get married at 32, let alone 23. 4 years. How many 4 years did she have to wait? After drinking a cup of tea, Lin Yong finally could not help reminding her, "Miss, you are holding the account book upside down." Lin Wanru looked up at him and straightened the account book without changing her expression. She said, "Why don't you go out? Don't you have work to do?" Lin Yong grinned and said, "I have finished my work today. I want to have a cup of tea and have a rest." Lin Wanru looked at the account book for a while. When she reached for the teacup, she seemed to take the letter. She opened the envelope and casually took a sip of tea. She did not put down the teacup and looked at the letter. Lin Yong could not help saying, "In fact, you don't need to read it. The brother who sent the letter said that the Li brothers would be here in a few days." "Well, I see." Lin Wanru took another sip of tea and said calmly. "Mississippi," Lin Yong suddenly said. "Yes." Lin Wanru raised her head and looked at him. Lin Yong pushed the teapot over and said, "Pour some water into the teacup. You've been drinking with an empty cup for so long. I feel uncomfortable seeing you. Get out." Lin Yong ran out of the room in a sorry state. He picked up the account book that had been thrown out of the room and put it on the stone table outside. Then he sat down on the stone bench and put his hands behind his head. He hummed a tune and a smile appeared on his honest face. The Li brothers were finally coming. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. It was related to the marriage of the Mississippi. He had to be very careful and not let the miss do whatever she wanted in her previous life. To have such a considerate servant, how much good karma must the miss have accumulated in her previous life? Of course, it had been more than 4 years since he had eaten the food made by the Li brothers. Thinking about it, it was really memorable. Liuzhou was not part of the capital region of the Qi kingdom. It was some distance away from the capital, but it was still a major commercial town. This time, the leader of the Lin family came to Liuzhou to deal with the business of the Lin family in Xuzhou. There were many Lin family in the Qi kingdom. However, in the eyes of the businessmen in the Qi kingdom, there was only one Lin family that they usually talked about. That was the Lin family in Fengzhou. The Lin family in Fengzhou was a legend. In other words, the leader of the Lin family in Fengzhou, the woman named Lin Wanru, was a legend. 5 or 6 years ago, the Lin family was still a medium-sized family in Fengzhou. Several generations of them had been in the jewelry business. Although they could be regarded as a rich family, it was only relative to ordinary people. The family had some savings and did not have much power. There were a lot of families in every prefecture. However, 5 or 6 years ago the situation changed. First, the Lin family used a year to make the jewelry business famous in the Qi kingdom. Even the concubines in the palace wanted jewelry from the Lin family. Then, the development of the Lin family was even more unstoppable. 4 years ago, the Lin family started to get involved in perfume, underwear, ready-made clothes, soap, liquor, and many other industries. These were all profiteering industries in the Qi kingdom. The reason was that these things could only be found in the Jing kingdom. The businessmen in the Qi kingdom had to brave many dangers and difficulties to transport these things back from the Jing kingdom. Naturally, the prices were high. Since the Lin family got involved in these industries, this market was completely broken. The low-priced and high-quality goods were very popular among the people. However, it was not the case for many businessmen. Cutting off one source of wealth was like killing one's parents. Naturally, there were some businessmen who regarded her as a thorn in their side. However, when they wanted to take action against the Lin family, they found out how powerful the Lin family was. Since several families joined forces to make things difficult for the Lin family and alerted the third prince, no one dared to do so. Only then did they find out that the one who supported the Lin family was the third prince, who was at the peak of his power in the Qi kingdom and was even more famous than the crown prince. Since then, the Lin family developed even faster. Because of their powerful background and sufficient supply, They did not need to travel far to the Jing kingdom to get what they wanted. They avoided many risks. When it came to perfume, ready-made clothes and other goods, all merchants in the Qi kingdom were willing to cooperate with them. In just 4 years, the Lin family became one of the wealthiest merchant families in the Qi kingdom from a medium-sized family in the Feng province. In terms of wealth, only a few families with deep roots could compare to them. In terms of influence, the Lin family with King Feng behind them did not lose to any of the wealthy families. Although all of this was on the premise that King Feng still had the upper hand in the competition with the crown prince, before that, the Lin family would not fall as long as King Feng did not fall. In fact, there was one more thing that no one could figure out. Even though the Lin family was backed by the third prince, the ready-made clothes and underwear of the Lin family could be imitated to a certain extent. However, the perfumes, spirits, and soaps involved strictly confidential secret recipes and could not be imitated. Moreover, the origin of the perfumes and soaps was in the Jing kingdom. If others wanted to buy them, they had to travel thousands of miles to the capital of the Jing kingdom. However, the Lin family directly built a factory in the Qi kingdom. Could it be that the Lin family and the person behind the production of the perfumes and soaps in the Jing kingdom had some unknown deal? Of course, no one knew about this. Chapter 11:11. The Qi Kingdom, the capital city. Prince Heng's residence. Zhao Zheng paced back and forth in the hall with a gloomy expression. He grumbled, "What is Imperial Father thinking? Has he become muddle-headed from his illness? If you want me to become the regent, then so be it. Why do you want Zhao Yi to supervise from the side? Why do you want him and his accomplices to find trouble with I all day long, making I lose face in front of the court officials? Why does your highness care about these things?" Behind him, a young man smiled and said, "As long as your highness is the crown prince, your status will be higher than the third prince's. His majesty has him supervise from the side only to supervise your highness. Your highness is the saber and Zhao Yi is only the whetstone. Otherwise, the regent would be the third prince, not your highness. Until the very last moment, no one will know Imperial Father's thoughts." Zhao Zheng's face was full of vexation. He suddenly looked at the young man behind him and said, "Protector Feng, I know that your empress is very powerful. As long as you can help I obtain the throne, I can promise you that after I ascend the throne, I will establish the holy religion as the national religion." Feng Yu's eyes flashed, but he was not in a hurry to agree. Instead, he smiled and said, "Your highness, do not worry. Between the third prince and your highness, since the empress has chosen your highness, she will definitely do her best to help." Zhao Zheng looked at him and said, "Not her best, but definitely. Protector Feng, do you understand what I mean?" Feng Yu was silent for a moment, then said, "This matter I still have to discuss with the empress. Your highness, I will take my leave. I still have some matters to attend to, so I will not see you off, Protector Feng." After Feng Yu left, an old man walked out from the back of the hall and walked to Zhao Zheng's side. He bowed and asked doubtfully, "Your highness, those people, are they really so powerful? Don't underestimate them." Zhao Zheng looked out of the hall and said slowly, "The power of the holy religion is far beyond our imagination. I suspect that they have people hiding in the palace. Even in Ai's palace, not everyone is Ai's man." The old man pondered for a moment and said, "Your highness, please forgive this old official for speaking out of turn. This holy religion is so powerful that they must have a motive. Your highness must be very careful if they join hands with them." "I know." Zhao Zheng nodded and said, "No matter what they want, the most important thing now is to ascend to that position. As for the rest, it won't be too late to settle it in the future." The three protector Feng, Heng. When Feng Yu left the Heng Prince's palace, the two protectors in purple were already waiting outside. The three of them passed through a few more alleys and after a few turns, they arrived in front of a small courtyard. After walking out of the room and through the courtyard, Feng Yu let out a long sigh of relief. A purple-robed man stepped forward and said in a deep voice, "Guardian, we have just received news that the believers in Lu province are no longer contactable." "What?" Feng Yu's expression changed drastically. He said angrily, "Another province." After a while, the purple-robed man finished explaining the situation. "It must be her. It must be her." Feng Yu was furious and even looked a little deranged. The believers of the holy religion were spread across the provinces of the Qi kingdom. Every month they would send news to the capital. However, since the beginning of the year they had lost contact with more than 10 provinces. The struggle for the throne between Zhao Zheng and the third prince had reached the most critical moment. The empress could not go out. He had sent the yellow emissary and the blue emissary, but none of them had returned. It was as if they had vanished from the face of the earth. They had completely lost contact. As a result, he did not dare to send purple-robed emissaries. Every purple-robed emissary had been painstakingly trained. The loss of one was a great loss to them. However, the consequence of this was that every fortnight, he would receive news that they had lost contact with a province. By now, more than 10 provinces had been lost. This situation was exactly the same as when they were in Shu province. Later, he realized that not only Shu province, but the believers of the entire Jing kingdom were no longer contactable. Aside from the other empress of the holy religion, who else could it be? From the moment they began spreading the word that there were 2 empresses in the holy religion, this matter had become irreparable. At that time, no one, including the empress, had expected that this unintentional action would become the source of the schism of the holy religion. Not only did the other side have the empress, they also had the envoy of the left. If they continued to ignore this matter, their foundation in the Qi kingdom would be destroyed. Fang Yu turned around and sternly said, "I'll go tell the empress and ask her to make a decision." In the room, the cross-legged middle-aged Taoist nun opened her eyes again. After a moment of thought, she said, "He's here." Outside the city gate of Liuzhou, a few carriages slowly entered. Su Zheng and the others had arrived in Lu province a month ago and had completely taken over the branch of the holy religion. For the past few months, whenever they arrived at a place, the first thing they did was to take over the believers of the holy religion in that province. Although there were some who were stubborn and unreasonable, they would try to reason with them when Fang punched them. If Taoist nun had not personally come, they could have even used this method to reunite the holy religion. However, half a month ago Ruoqing found out that she was pregnant. They could only slow down their pace and find a place to rest first. Fang sat outside the carriage and turned around to say, "Young master, the capital of Lu province is just up ahead." Outside the capital, Li Yi alighted from the carriage and took a few steps forward. He extended his hand to the woman who was waiting outside the city. "Long time no see." Chapter 11-12. The handshake ceremony was a custom in Miss Lin's hometown. If he hadn't inquired about it out of curiosity when they passed by Fengzhou, Fang would have believed what the son-in-law had said. He looked at the 2 people who were holding hands not far away and fell into deep thought. The handshake ceremony was a custom in the Li brothers' hometown. If he hadn't asked someone to confirm it when they went to Jing Kingdom last time, Lin Yong would have believed what Miss Lin had said. He looked at the 2 people beside him who looked calm and relaxed, deep in thought. He suddenly felt something and looked up at the opposite side. The man opposite also looked at him. They looked at each other. Fang smiled and said, "Lin brothers, long time no see." A smile also appeared on Lin Yong's face. He cupped his hands and said, "Brother Fang, long time no see." Lin Wanru and Lin Yong came to Liuzhou this time to expand their business. In the past few years from the remote Fengzhou, she had expanded the Lin family's business all over the Qi kingdom. She had personally expanded the business in almost every province and prefecture. Of course, it could also be said that it was the Li family's business. Because a few years ago the Lin family and the Li family had formed a community of destiny because of their business relationship. They shared weal and woe and they were as close as a family. The Lin family had a manor in Liuzhou. Every time she went to a place she would buy a manor and rest there temporarily. In the past few years she had traveled to all the provinces and prefectures of the Qi kingdom and the Lin family. Ruoqing and the others were tired from the long journey. Lin Wanru's maid, Xiu, took them to the back house to settle down. The house was very big and it was more than enough for the whole family. Li Duan was a little excited. He was at the age where his curiosity was budding, and he didn't like to stay in one place all the time. He had seen many strange things along the way and he was the happiest one. This must be Dwainer. Lin Wanru looked at him and said with a smile, "The last time I saw him, he couldn't even crawl. In the blink of an eye, he has grown so much." In the blink of an eye. Lin Yong sighed and said, "In the blink of an eye, it has been 4 or 5 years." Old Fang glanced at Lin Yong in surprise. He closed his mouth, which was about to open. Li Duan stood there and looked at Li Yi with a pleading look. Calling a person was the most basic form of courtesy, but he did not know this beautiful one. He did not know how to address the person in front of him. The last time Lin Wanru went to the capital, Li Duan was still young and didn't even know how to crawl. Naturally he couldn't remember her. Li touched his head and said, "Call her Aunt Lin." Li Duan nodded and said obediently, "Aunt Lin." Lin Wanru smiled and said, "Dwainer is still as obedient as when he was young." Li Duan lowered his head in embarrassment. When Li Yi and Lin Wanru went to the back house, he looked up at Fang and asked, "Fang, Aunt Lin, Should I call her mother? According to his experience, from aunt to mother was only a matter of time. It was just that he couldn't grasp the timing. A long time ago he discovered that Lil Auntie didn't know everything. Uncle Fong was omniscient. If there was something he didn't understand and it wasn't convenient to ask his father, he could ask Uncle Fong. Fong thought for a moment and said, "Don't call her yet. When you want to call her, Fong will tell you." "I see. Thank you, Fong." Li Duan nodded and ran to the back house. Fong looked ahead. Lin Yong had just gone in with them. He touched his beardless chin and murmured, "This Lin brothers is interesting." Drunk Ink, Ruoqing, and the others were a little tired from the journey. After settling down, they went back to their rooms to rest. Li Duan went to practice. Chang's requirements for him were a little stricter than Mississippi Lu. Although he was tired, his advantages were also very obvious. Rui became a guru. Luck and cheating played a big part. Her understanding of martial arts was certainly not as thorough as Su and Chang. And Chang was different from Su. Chang grew up in the palace since he was a child and was qualified to read the royal library, which contained countless martial arts secrets. Compared with Su, it was like the relationship between a rich and powerful sect and a rogue cultivator. In terms of fighting, it was not certain who was better. But in terms of profound knowledge, Su and his old lover were no match for him. Perhaps only old man Yang could compare with Chang. What's more, Chang was not limited to giving advice to Li Duan. He really taught him everything without holding anything back. Li Duan, who was only 5 years old, had already cultivated internal force. Ordinary adult men were no match for him. Ruoqing and the others went to rest. Li Yi didn't need to rest, and it was not appropriate for him to rest. He hadn't seen Lin Wanru for several years. He should have had a lot to say, but when he opened his mouth, he didn't know where to start. "Young master, I'm going out with the Lin brothers. Miss, I'll take brother Fong out for a walk." Fong and Lin Yong, who were following behind the two of them, suddenly spoke at the same time. They spoke in unison as if they had a tacit understanding. After a moment of shock, the two of them turned their heads at the same time. Their gazes met and they confirmed each other's gazes. At the same time, there was an expression of mutual appreciation on their faces. When Fong and Lin Yong saw each other again, their relationship had progressed at lightning speed. With their arms around each other's shoulders, they walked out, leaving only Li Yi and Lin Wanru in the room. All these years, cough. Li Yi looked at her, then shifted his gaze away. "You've worked hard." The Lin family's business in the Qi Kingdom was actually more like the Li family's business in the Qi Kingdom. The Li family's shares were more, and what they invested were the core formulas and the like. But other than these, there was nothing else. All the shops and workshops in the Qi Kingdom were built by her alone, including the expansion of the business in one state after another. In 4 years she had spread the shops all over the Qi Kingdom. One could imagine the hardships involved in this. Lin Wanru shook her head and said, "There's nothing hard about it. In fact, I've been busy like this in the past. Being busy with results is always better than not having any results." After saying this, Li Yi found himself speechless again. Compared to a few years ago when he was in Feng's state, there seemed to be an additional layer of invisible membrane between the two of them. This slight barrier made him feel a little irritated. Because of the irritated feeling, he felt a little thirsty. He walked to the table, took a teacup, poured a cup of water and drank it in one gulp. Only then did the irritation in his heart subside a little. Lin Wanru coughed softly and said, "You used my cup again." I'm sorry. Li Yi almost coughed out the mouthful of water. He hurriedly put down the teacup. Then he realized something and asked, "Why did you say again?" "Forget it." Lin Wanru shook her head and said, "Anyway, it's not the first time." She walked over and took out a few account books from the cabinet and handed them to him. She said, "If Manager Li has nothing to do, help me check the accounts." Li Yi was startled. He felt as if something that had been lost for a long time had come back. He smiled and said, "I'm just an accountant. If there's anything, just tell shopkeeper Lin." Lin Yong and Fong, who were sitting in the courtyard strolling, turned their heads at the same time. When they heard the laughter coming from the room, they turned back at the same time and looked at each other again. Fong looked at Lin Yong and suddenly said, "Lin brothers, my son-in-law and your young lady are the kind of people who are reserved. They won't open their mouths until the last moment. As servants?" He paused and asked, "Lin brothers, do you know what I'm going to say?" Understood. Lin Yong grinned and said, "Some things they are reserved, but we can't be reserved." Fong was stunned for a moment and laughed casually. "Why didn't I realize before that Lin brothers are so interesting? I regret not having met earlier. It's really like old friends at first sight. You can only use like old friends at first sight, when you meet for the first time? Lin Yong looked at Fang and corrected him. Brother Fang needs to read more books? Are you saying that I'm uncultured? Fang's face darkened and said, you used to regret not having met earlier, correctly? I didn't have the nerve to expose you just now. Chapter 11-13. Fang and Lin Yong really loved each other. When they walked out just now, they put their arms around each other's shoulders and called each other brother. Li checked the accounts for a while. When he walked out of the room again, he saw Lin Yong hanging on the tree by Fang. Fang's strength was beyond doubt, and others could not be envious of him at all. He was born with great strength. When his family conditions were not good, he only looked stronger than others. Later, when the material conditions kept up, he began to leave ordinary people far behind. Coupled with the training of second granduncle, even Li Yi did not dare to say that he could easily defeat him. His fists were too heavy and one punch could kill someone. Lin Yong only had some skills, but he could only be regarded as half a person in the martial arts world. Of course he was no match for Fang. Li brothers, save me, save me. Lin Yong hung on the tree. Seeing Li Yi coming out, he seemed to see his savior. Li Yi glanced at Fang, and then Fang jumped on the tree reluctantly and put him down. In fact, Ruoqing's pregnancy was somewhat beyond their expectation. This time they came to the Qi Kingdom for one more important thing in addition to sightseeing: to unify the holy religion. Su Zheng was indeed a rare talent. In the later generations he would definitely be the leader of a multi-level marketing organization, a large-scale one, and the #1 target of the state to crack down and ban. Their doctrine had become to persuade people to do good, leading the so-called holy religion founded by Taoist nun to the right path. All the believers had the right to believe or not at any time. In essence, there was not much difference from the regular religions in the later generations. However, it was impossible for Su Zheng to complete this difficult task alone. No matter how high his status was, it was not higher than that of Taoist nun. Many things needed Ruoqing to do. Now that Ruoqing was pregnant, Li Yi naturally would not let her appear in public again. The matter of the holy religion was put aside for the time being. Along the way they collected a lot of news about the Qi Kingdom. The emperor of the Qi Kingdom had been ill for a long time and did not care about the state affairs. These years he had been ill several times and almost died, but in the end he did not die. If he died, it would be straightforward. The eldest prince Zhao Zheng was the legitimate crown prince. Before the emperor died, there was no edict to depose the crown prince. He would be the new emperor. The third prince Zhao Yi would have to go wherever he wanted. Unless he rebelled or Zhao Zheng suddenly became hysterical and passed the throne to him, he would have no fate with the throne in this life. However, as long as the old emperor did not die, Zhao Zheng was only the crown prince. If he reached out in advance, it would also be a rebellion. Therefore, the two people and the two forces were in a deadlock. However, the emperor of the Qi Kingdom not only let the eldest prince, Zhao Zheng, supervise the state, but also let the third prince, Zhao Yi, supervise from the side. It was not hard to imagine what the court of the Qi Kingdom would be like. Of course, there were benefits to doing this, and they were not small. The two forces were at odds with each other. Each was waiting to seize the other's weakness and mistake, so neither dared to make mistakes. When Li Yi left, the Qi Kingdom was in constant dispute because of the discussion of the silver for crimes. The people were not calm, and it was said that several states had revolted. When he came back this time, those hidden dangers in the Qi Kingdom were all gone. A few years ago, under the leadership of the third prince, the court adopted a gentle method and implemented the debit and credit bookkeeping system. Until now, it had been quite effective. Although the corruption among the officials had not been completely stopped, it had been quite effective. As expected, those who could become the emperor were not easy to deal with. Li Yi did not know what the emperor of the Qi Kingdom thought about the struggle for the throne, but he did play a good hand. For a long time, including now, the prosperity of the Qi Kingdom was justified. If it was not for the rapid rise of the Jing Kingdom in recent years, perhaps they would still be living under the shadow of the Qi Kingdom. As for who would become the emperor of the Qi Kingdom, Li Yi did not care much. It had little to do with him. Whether Zhao Zheng or Zhao Yi took over the Qi Kingdom, they would not pose much of a threat to the Jing Kingdom. A long time ago, the Jing Kingdom had been at the forefront of the times, and the speed of its advancement was getting faster and faster, leaving the other countries far behind. It even had the perspective of God. Li Xian had been improving the cannons, and he had also begun to develop and supervise the manufacture of many other types of firearms. As long as they did not encounter an extremely fatuous emperor who overthrew everything they had done, the current Jing Kingdom was not something that the Qi Kingdom could catch up with even if it had one or a few wise emperors. Under such circumstances, of course, he hoped that Zhao Yi would be the one to take over. All his life he was not fond of owing favors. He did not like owing favors to women, and he did not like owing favors to men. The former could be repaid with his body, but if he wanted to repay the latter he would have to do something else. There was no doubt that the third prince, Zhao Yi, had played a great role in the smooth sailing of the Lin family's business for the past few years. It could be said that he had taken good care of Wanru. This was a great favor. Just based on this point, the scales in his heart had to tilt in favor of him. Of course, it was impossible for him to go to his side and give him advice now, but he did not mind giving him a push when it was necessary. Lin Wanru walked out of the room and gave some instructions to Lin Yong. Although the Liuzhou was far from the capital of the Qi kingdom, and it was not considered an important military town, it was a big commercial province. Geographically speaking, the Liuzhou was in the hinterland of the Qi kingdom and did not border other countries, so it did not have the conditions to become a big commercial province. However, the people of the Liuzhou had been raising silkworms for generations, and the silk of the Liuzhou was famous far and wide. This time Lin Wanru came to expand the silk and clothing business. If it was successful, perhaps the Liuzhou would become their biggest clothing base in the Qi kingdom. Lin Yong looked at Li Yi, who was not far away, and then looked at Lin Wanru and asked, "Miss, how long will we stay in the Liuzhou this time?" Lin Wanru was the helmsman of the Lin family. She only needed to ensure that the general direction was not wrong, so she did not need to stay in the Liuzhou for a long time. Other things would be handled by the steward. After thinking for a while, she said, "About a month." Lin Yong looked at Li Yi and asked, "Li brothers, how long will you stay in the Liuzhou?" Ruoqing was pregnant. They could either go back to Shuzhou or Rui City now, or stay here and wait for her to give birth. Although Rui City and Shuzhou were more suitable for nurturing the fetus, they were already deep in the Qi kingdom. If they went back, it would probably take a few months. The journey would be tiring and bumpy. After discussing with Li Yi and Rui, they decided to stay in the Liuzhou and go back after she gave birth. However, in this way their plan to deter from the Qi kingdom to the Jing kingdom would have to be put on hold. Li Yi thought for a while and said, "Less than a year." During this time, naturally, he would not only wait for Ruoqing to give birth, but also carefully plan the affairs of the holy religion and the business of the Qi kingdom. Miss Lin only planned to stay here for a month, but the Li brothers wanted to stay for almost a year. Lin Yong thought for a while, looked at Lin Wanru and said, "Miss, I think that the Liuzhou is different from other places. The business here is developed and there are many rich businessmen. If we enter the Liuzhou abruptly and meddle in the business of the Liuzhou, I'm afraid that they will be dissatisfied and suppress us. In order to avoid accidents, I'm afraid we should stay for a few more days. It's safer this way. Miss, what do you think?" Hearing this, Lin Wanru nodded and said, "You're right. Then let's stay for a few more days." Lin Yong agreed deeply. He smiled and said, "I think we should also stay for a year and a half. It should be enough." Lin Wanru looked at him and frowned slightly. When she was about to speak, a young man knocked on the courtyard door and walked in with a few attendants. "Miss Lin," he looked at Lin Wanru and said with a smile, "I'm here to discuss the cooperation between the Lin and Lu families." Lin Wanru and the young man went to the parlor. Lin Yong did not follow them. He walked to Li Yi and said, "They are from the Lu family. The Lu family is the largest magnate in the Liuzhou. They are relatives of the royal family and have been in the silk business for generations." Li Yi looked at Lin Yong in surprise. He seemed to be a little too talkative today. These days he comes here every day to talk about cooperation. Lin Yong pursed his lips and said, "Don't think that I can't see it. What business talk? He has been dragging the matter of cooperation. He is here to pursue our family's miss." Li Yi continued to look at him. "I just remembered and said it casually." Seeing Li Yi look at him, Lin Yong waved his hand and said, "I definitely did not say that he is Li brothers' rival in love. I also did not hint at you to pursue our Mississippi Li brothers. Please don't misunderstand, please don't misunderstand." Chapter 11:14. The young man walked out of the hall and cupped his hands at Lin Wanru. He said, "Miss Wanru, I believe you know that this is good for both the Lin and Lu families. I hope you can consider what I have said." Lin Wanru shook her head and simply said, "If young Master Lu is referring to something other than cooperation, then there is no need to consider it." The young man was not angry. He only smiled and said, "I have come with sincerity. Miss Lin, there is no need to reject me. We still have some time, so you don't have to rush to answer." With that, he cupped his hands and left. When he left, his eyes paused on Li Yi for a moment. But it was only for a moment and he slowly walked out. Li brothers, look, this young Master Lu is also handsome and elegant. If you don't seize the opportunity, before Lin Yong could finish, he was dragged away by Fang with his mouth covered. Li raised his head and looked at Lin Wanru. He asked, "Are you having trouble with your business?" "It's not really a problem." Lin Wanru shook her head and sat across from him. She said, "The Lu family in Liuzhou is also in the cloth and silk business. In recent years they have expanded into ready-made clothing. It is more or less the same as us. We are in the same place and doing the same business. If we can't be friends, we can only be enemies. Moreover, Liuzhou is only so big. The big families have already divided the resources. It is not so easy for us to get another piece of the pie. They have the materials and the market. We have the technology. Cooperation is a win-win situation." Li looked at her and asked, "You don't seem too willing? What they want is not just cooperation." Lin Wanru shook her head and said, "They want me to marry them." She looked at Li Yi and blinked. She said, "Manager Li, in the contract we negotiated, there is no such thing as selling myself, of course." Li Yi nodded and said, "Cooperation is cooperation, but this request is too much. We absolutely can't agree to it. We can stop doing business in Liuzhou, but we can't treat marriage lightly." "Not necessarily." Lin Wanru looked out the door and said, "The Lu family is a relative of the royal family and their influence runs deep. Their silk business is spread all over the Qi kingdom. Not only in the Lu province but in other places as well. Although the Lin family has accumulated some wealth over the years and is praised by many, their foundation is still shallow. Without the protection of the third prince, they would be like duckweed in the water, willow catkins in the wind, at the mercy of others." Li shook his head and said, "Marriage should be the result of two people liking each other. It shouldn't be some kind of exchange of benefits, and it shouldn't be a child's play. In this world, how can everything be perfect, Rui?" Lin Wanru smiled and said, "In this world, how many couples don't like each other? So what if they like each other?" If that was the only ambition he had, it was very likely that he had already achieved it. But since he was going to stay in Liuzhou for a while and had nothing to do, he would do some things while he was at it. If others wanted to fight for something, he did not mind playing along. The business expansion in Liuzhou was still in the preliminary stage, so there would not be any obstacles for the time being. Su Zheng's plan to unify the holy religion had encountered a big obstacle. Before Liuzhou, they had unified more than 10 prefectures and did not encounter too many obstacles. Perhaps this finally alerted the other party. The next few prefectures that Su Zheng brought people to could no longer be contacted. The headquarters of the holy religion was in the capital of the Qi kingdom. There were branches in most of the prefectures and prefectures in the Qi kingdom. These branches were managed by the elites of the holy religion. On normal days they had one-way contact with the followers. When Su Zheng and the others went there, they did not contact these people. As a result, they could not get the list of followers. All their actions could only be put on hold. The Qi kingdom was much larger than the Wu kingdom and the Jing kingdom. It had nearly 100 prefectures and prefectures. They had only unified a dozen or so prefectures. After the other party was on guard, every step became extremely difficult. It would take a long time to unify one prefecture and one prefecture. Li Yi thought for a while, then borrowed Wanru's study room and began to write a letter. He wrote a few words on the envelope. To Su Tian. Chapter 11:15. They had to do things in a simple and straightforward manner. They had to solve the biggest problem with the smallest investment. The holy religion claimed to have 100,000 believers in the Qi kingdom. That was 5 or 6 years ago, and it was unknown how many there were now. Was it a big deal to persuade a multi-level marketing organization with 100,000 people to mend their ways and return to the right path? All they needed was a piece of paper to solve this big problem. In the final analysis, the only one standing in their way was the Taoist nun. Without a leader at the master level, the rest of the people were just a plate of loose sand. They were nothing to be afraid of. Unfortunately, Su was very interested in the Taoist nun. There was another person who was more interested in the Taoist nun than Su. He was more interested in the affairs between Su and the Taoist nun. Therefore, what he had to do was to send this letter. The situation in the Wu kingdom was good. Yang Liuqing and the others had already occupied nearly 20 states, which was enough to stand up to the imperial court of the Wu kingdom. Some powerful bandits, who had been observing for a long time, had been showing signs of taking sides in recent days. Outside the cities they occupied, countless people were looking forward to being liberated as soon as possible. They had won countless battles and stabilized the people in the states and prefectures they occupied and saved them from the chaos of war. Today she had become the faith in the hearts of the people in the Wu Kingdom. The chaos in the Wu Kingdom wouldn't last for a few years. It seemed easy for them to rebel in the Wu Kingdom, but in fact there were many predecessors and descendants. And they didn't know whether they were predecessors or descendants. In short, in the 5,000 years of China, countless predecessors and descendants had paved the way for them. If it wasn't for the fact that the Wu Kingdom could have a stable regime in the future, they would have been advancing unhurriedly. Relying on these past and future experiences, it was a shame that they hadn't been able to conquer the imperial city of the Wu Kingdom until now. Life in Liuzhou was very comfortable. There were not many people here and the scenery was beautiful. The river snail rice noodles were delicious. Li Yi had been to many prefectures, including those of the Jing Kingdom, the Qi Kingdom, and the Wu Kingdom. These prefectures were neither the most prosperous in industry nor the most prosperous in commerce, but overall they gave people a good feeling. The scenery was beautiful and the prefectures were extremely clean. In his mind, the livability index of these prefectures could be ranked in the top 5 among all the prefectures. Lin Wanru and Lin Yong were not very familiar with Liuzhou, but since they were born in the Qi Kingdom, they were more familiar with the place than Li Yi and the others. These days Lin Wanru and Lin Yong brought them around. Li Duan liked to play. The main reason was that he didn't need to practice when he played. Moreover, he knew that when he went back this time he would have to go to school with others. There wouldn't be many free and unfettered days. Old Fong was alone on this trip, but he wasn't when he was out having fun. His relationship with Lin Yong progressed rapidly. He often saw Lin Yong asking him for advice with a sincere face. It seemed that ever since he was hung on the tree by Fong, the two of them often got together, and no one knew what they talked about. Wanru was no longer considered an outsider in the Li family. Before Zueimo and Ruoqing came into the family, she got along very well with Rui and Rui. She was one of Mississippi Lu's few friends. The friendship between the two had been forged several years ago. The last time they were in the capital, she even taught Rui how to read poetry. It seemed that from then on Mississippi Lu only started to take the initiative to learn. Liuzhou was not big. They would occasionally go out for a walk. In half a month they had visited all the places and there was no good place to go. Once people stopped they would always want to find something to do. But this place was different from the Jing Kingdom. There weren't so many opponents who took the initiative to make trouble. It was also different from the Wu Kingdom. They couldn't casually rebel, and the days gradually began to become boring. Fortunately, there was Lin Yong to talk to him often. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but he always felt that after hanging out with Fong for a period of time, Lin Yong began to talk more. And as he chatted, the topic would always turn to Lin Wanru. Our miss likes to eat sweet things since she was young. When she was young she ate bad teeth. Later she slowly changed. But she usually likes to eat some pastries. Lin Yong almost watched her grow up. Naturally, he knew her character and preferences very well. Also, Miss has been competitive and capable since she was young. Otherwise, old master wouldn't have handed the Lin family over to her. Lin Yong recalled the past and sighed. He said, actually during that period of time Miss didn't have it easy. The family didn't like her and there were a lot of rumors and slanders outside. Miss had to bear all of it alone. After you came, Li brothers, everything changed. Lin Yong's face revealed a happy expression. He said, ever since you helped her deal with the second master, everyone in the family has been obedient to her. These few years there hasn't been any more trouble. It's all thanks to you, Li brothers. It's all because of her own tricks. Li shook his head. Among all the women he knew, the most competitive was probably Rui. But in fact, Emingzu and Wanru were the same kind of people as her. It was just that they focused on different areas. Rui was good at martial arts, while Emingzu was good at governing the country. Sometimes even Li Yi himself had to admire Wanru's business methods. Li Yi looked at Lin Yong and asked, has she been so powerful since she was young? That's not all. Lin Yong thought for a while and shook his head. He said, don't be fooled by Mrs. Ability. In fact, she was still wetting the bed when she was 5 years old. Seeing Lin Wanru coming out of the inner courtyard, Lin Yong hurriedly shut up. Seeing that his gaze and expression were not right, Lin Wanru frowned slightly. She walked over and asked, what are you talking about? He's talking about how good you've been at doing business these few years. Li Yi gave her a thumbs up and said, to be honest, I really admire you when it comes to doing business. Since you said that, I'll take it that you're mocking me. Lin Wanru looked at him and said, at best, I'm just a small steward under Manager Li. When it comes to doing business, how can I be better than you? Li shook his head and said, I only know a little more than others in certain aspects. In fact, I don't know much about doing business. There are many things that I still need to ask you. He picked up the teacup and put it down again. He said, right, I happen to have something to ask you. Lin Wanru sat opposite him and asked, what is it? Li Yi thought for a moment and asked, did you really still wet the bed when you were 5 years old? Hearing this, Lin Wanru was startled and Lin Yang's expression changed greatly. Lin Wanru took a deep breath, her chest rising and falling a few times. She almost crushed her teeth and squeezed out 2 words from between her teeth. Lin Yong. Judging from the speed at which Lin Yong escaped, he should have been sparring with Fong recently. His skills were clearly much better than before. Seeing that her face was already red, Li Yi hurriedly said, it's nothing. Lin Yong just mentioned it in passing. I'm not afraid of you laughing at me, but actually when I was young? She probed, when you were 5 years old you still wet the bed? Looking at Miss Lin's expectant gaze, Li Yi shook his head and said, no, I stopped wetting the bed when I was 1 year old. When Lu Luo stepped into the courtyard he saw such a scene. The legendary woman of the Lin family, who had always been indifferent to men, was blushing as she stretched out her hand to hit another man. Of course, anyone with a discerning eye could see that it was a hit, in a flirtatious manner. He had come here many times under the guise of discussing business, but Lin Wanru had never treated him like this. With just one look he felt a strong sense of jealousy towards that young man. He took a deep breath and calmed himself down. With a smile on his face, he stepped forward and said, Wanru, have you thought about the matter I mentioned last time? Lin Wanru glanced at Li Yi who was beside her. He was still angry about what had happened just now. She said angrily, I'm just a small steward. If young Master Lu has anything to say, it's better to discuss it with my family's shopkeeper. Shopkeeper? Lu Luo was startled. Your family? Li Yi stood up and looked at the young man in front of him. He said, Li Yi, her family's shopkeeper. We can talk about cooperation, but I won't marry. Chapter 11:16. The Lin family of Feng Prefecture was only a new family in the Qi Kingdom. The so-called new clans were naturally different from the Lu clan, which had been around for hundreds of years and had a deep foundation. In terms of prestige, wealth, and influence, the Lu clan, which had been around for generations, was far superior to those nouveau riche clans. In their eyes, the Lin family and the Chen family, which had been in the limelight for the past few years, were all nouveau riches. The wealth that they had accumulated in a short period of time might be comparable to that of a big family like the Lu family. However, their foundation was shallow, to the point that they had no foundation at all. If the Lin family and the Chen family were not backed by the third prince and the Lu family was also one of the third prince's supporters, he would not have been so polite to them. At least, in the territory of Lu Prefecture, the Lu family did not have to be polite to anyone. He had put down his pride and visited the Lin family several times with great sincerity. He had already given the Lin family enough face. However, what Lin Wanru did just now was rubbing his face on the ground. If the head of the wealthy Lin family was only a lowly steward, who else in the world could be called a shopkeeper? This was an insult to him. Lu Luo stopped smiling and said calmly, Miss Lin, the Lu family came with sincerity. I hope you won't play this kind of joke on me. Lin Wanru shook her head and said, I'm not joking. This is really our shopkeeper. If that's the case, then there's nothing else to talk about. Lu Luo stood up and said this. He turned around and left. Although he did not say much, Li Yi could still feel his strong resentment as he walked out of the door. Li Yi looked at Lin Wanru and said, It's over. You've offended the local bully. If he holds a grudge and seeks revenge, it will be difficult to do business in Lu Prefecture. What should we do then? She sighed and said, Lu Prefecture is not like Feng Prefecture. We have no one to rely on here. We can't win against them. What's there to be afraid of? Lu Zhou isn't even surnamed Lu. Do you think they'll chase you out? Although Lu Zhou's surname isn't Lu, it isn't Lin either. Li Yi thought about it carefully and said, That's not necessarily true. If you carefully consider what happened last time, it might be possible to let it have the surname Lin. Lin Wanru looked at him and asked, What happened last time? Mississippi Lu walked over from behind and stopped beside him. She asked, What happened last time? Last time. What happened last time? Li Yi thought for a moment and said, It doesn't matter what happened last time. Anyway, don't worry about the Lu family. We have a strong foundation in Lu Zhou. We're not any worse than them. Don't worry. Fortunately, the branch of holy religion in Lu Zhou was already under his command. Chapter 11:17. The Wu family, the Qin family, and the Wei family, have they lost their minds? In the Lu residence, Lu Luo, who had just received the news, had a dark expression on his face. He was pacing in the hall and growling in a low voice. This time he had mobilized the Lu family's resources and joined forces with the other major clans in Lu Zhou to cut off the Lin family's supply of goods, completely blocking the Lin family's escape route. The other party's shop and workshop in Lu Zhou had already been built. If there was no supply of goods, all the initial investment would be for naught. At this time, if he used another identity to negotiate with Lin Wanru, the result would be completely different from before. However, he did not expect that after a few days of gloating, the blockade he had formed with the major clans in Lu Zhou to seal off the Lin family would be torn open. The Wu family, the Chen family, and the Wei family were not as rich and powerful as the Lu family, but when they joined forces, the Lu family could not touch them easily. The problem was that they had previously promised him that they would unite to fight against the Lin family, who was an outsider. However, at the critical moment they went back on their word, causing the Lu family to waste a lot of resources. Could it be that these clans were spies planted by the Lin family in Lu Zhou? Lu Luo asked with a dark expression. What did they say? One of the servants hesitated for a moment before saying, They said that they would be bastards if they didn't earn money. Thank you, young master, for giving them the opportunity to cooperate with the Lin family. Lu Luo almost spat out a mouthful of blood. He said furiously, Bastards, bastards, they've been fooling me from the beginning. Shut up. A middle-aged man walked in from outside the door and glanced at Lu Luo. The latter immediately shut his mouth. He could be arrogant in front of outsiders, but he did not dare to lose his composure in front of his father, the current master of the Lu family. I handed over the Lu family's business to you. Look at what you've done these days. The middle-aged man looked at him coldly and said, The Lin family could not have come this far without the support of the third prince. If you go against the Lin family, you are going against the third prince. Are you going to take the blame or the Lu family? Father, Lu Luo opened his mouth but did not say anything. The middle-aged man paused for a moment before continuing. However, even though the third prince thinks highly of the Lin family, our Lu family is not one to be trifled with. If we were to lose like this, I'm afraid that the third prince will look down on us. Lu Luo was delighted to hear that and immediately said, Father, you are right. The Lu family is a century-old family. How can we lose to the Lin family? Xiu thought for a moment and said, 9 years old. How old was your miss at that time? I think 14 years old. Then, when your miss was 14 years old, did she still wet the bed? From the beginning, Li Yi saw Lin Wanru standing in the distance and looking at them from time to time. At a certain moment she finally came over and asked, You and Xiu, what were you talking about just now? Li Yi said helplessly, You didn't teach her how to deal with the Lu family, so I had to teach her myself. Lin Wanru still looked a little doubtful and asked, That's all? That's all. Li Yi looked at her and said in surprise, Xiu was about to cry because of the Lu family's means. I just taught her how to deal with it. What else could I say besides that? I can't say that you still wet the bed occasionally after you were 10 years old, can I? Lin Wanru was stunned, and then her face began to blush and blush. Generally, people would not wet the bed after they were 1 or 2 years old, but before she was 14 years old, this kind of shameful thing would happen occasionally. This embarrassment lasted until she was 14 years old and then disappeared completely. But after she was 5 years old, the only one who knew about this matter besides her was Xiu, who slept with her at that time. How long had it been? The two closest people around her had actually betrayed her at the same time. Xiu, she clenched her teeth and turned to the inner courtyard. A puzzled look appeared on Li Yi's face. Did he say anything wrong just now? What's the point of venting your anger on Xiu? If you have the ability, come at me. In the Lu family, Lu Luo held a piece of paper in his hand and asked uncertainly, Do they really give this kind of thing all over the street? The servant nodded and said, Yes, young master. The shopkeeper and the shop assistant of their shop have a thick stack of it in their hands. They give it to everyone they see. The one in my hand was forced to me by them. It is said that they also recruited people and gave them 10 copper coins a day. Lu Luo looked at the paper in his hand and said with a smile, They cut the price by 10% on the first day, by 20% on the second day, by 30% on the third and fourth day. Half a month later they actually cut the price by 90%. He put the paper on the table and said mockingly, They cut the price by 10%. Why didn't they give it away for free? The Lu family gave 10% of the profit, so the number of customers in the shop had multiplied over the past few days. They had the idea of small profits but quick turnover. However, small profits but quick turnover did not mean that the lower the price, the better. 10% of the price was far lower than the cost price. The more they sold, the more they would lose. If the people of Luzhou bought their goods on the last 2 days, even if the Lin family was wealthy and did not care about the loss of Luzhou, they would still become a joke in the business world. What the proud daughter of the Lin family, the Hua Mulan of the business world. It turned out that it was all just a rumor. In half a month, get someone to buy a lot of the Lin family's goods. Lu Luo twitched the corner of his mouth and said, "They just opened for business and they already gave us such a big gift. They are too kind." Chapter 11:18. There were a few new clothing stores in Liuzhou. Almost everyone inside and outside the city knew about it. The news spread far and wide. It was no less than half a year ago when the provincial governor of Liuzhou was arrested for corruption, or when a group of bandits who had been harming the people for more than a decade were all beheaded by the government. Within a day, everyone knew about it. It was not entirely because the newly opened stores were cutting prices so much that it was unprecedented. The main reason was that no one had seen the overwhelming publicity on the streets and alleys of the city. Almost everyone in Liuzhou had a copy of the leaflet that was the size of a palm. There was more than one. After reading through the leaflet, the literate people knew that this was a big discount for the opening of the clothing store. After half a month, they could buy ready-made clothes and cloth at a low price of 10%. They had seen shops reduce prices for promotion, but they had never seen such a ruthless reduction. What was the difference between 10% of the price and giving it away for free? Those who could not read took the leaflet and asked others. They understood the general meaning. After asking, they were puzzled and in disbelief. A few days ago, the Lu family had cut prices by 10%. Many people already thought that they were taking advantage of the situation. Several stores were crowded with customers. The prices of these newly opened shops had been reduced to only 10%. Compared to the preferential treatment offered by the Lu family, the difference was nearly 10 times. It seemed to be somewhat inadequate. They did not have to worry that the other party would cheat them. The words on the leaflet were very clear. If they wanted to play tricks like raising prices first and then lowering prices, the government would not let them go. On the street, a woman took the leaflet from a shop assistant. After looking at it, she said in surprise, "In a few days their clothes will be so cheap. If it's true, we have to buy a few more." The man next to her said in surprise, "Didn't you just buy a few days ago? Why are you still buying?" The woman rolled her eyes and said, "Those are from the Lu family. How can the Lu family's things compare to the Lin family's? I've been looking forward to their store opening in Liuzhou for a long time. The prices are so cheap. It would be a waste not to buy them." The man hesitated for a moment and asked, "You bought so many clothes. Can you wear them all?" "I'm a woman. What's wrong with a woman buying a few beautiful clothes?" The woman looked at him and said with dissatisfaction, "Besides, no matter how many clothes I buy, aren't they all for you to see?" What about me? You're a scholar but you don't even know how to calculate." Buying a piece of clothing from the Lu family is equivalent to buying 2 or 10 pieces of clothing from the Lin family, but it's not even as beautiful as the Lin family. If I buy it this time, I won't have to buy it again this year. Do the math. How much money can you save? What about me? Do you not love me anymore? No, you didn't even buy me clothes. You really don't love me anymore. Did you fall in love with some vixen? Then let's buy it," the man sighed. The Lin family, the Lin family, the Lin family's underwear, the Lin family's perfume and soap, the Lin family's ready-made clothes, and the money he earned from selling his paintings were all given to the Lin family. Fortunately, although his wife spent a lot of money, she always kept her word. If she said she wouldn't buy it this year, she wouldn't buy it again this year. However, it seemed that there were only 2 months left this year. Before the Lin family's ready-made clothes shop opened for business, it had already attracted the attention of countless people. Regardless of how many people would patronize it, at least it was the first time in history that a few small shops could cause such a sensation. On the first day of the shop's opening, several shop assistants and shopkeepers were anxiously waiting, but there were only a few customers. Most of the people who came to take a look were asking if the 90% price reduction in half a month was true. Not a single person was really willing to buy. When the Lu family cut the price by 10%, the shop's threshold was almost trampled to pieces. Now that they had the same price as the Lu family, the shop was deserted. Comparing the two, it was really sad. "Sir, what are you looking at?" Seeing someone come in, a shop assistant hurriedly greeted him. "I heard that your shop will reduce the price by 90% in half a month?" The man looked at the shop assistant and asked doubtfully, "Is it true?" Absolutely. The shop assistant smiled and asked, "Sir, do you want to look at clothes? What do you want to look at?" The man glared at him and said, "Do you think I'm stupid to spend the money of 9 clothes to buy one? Why don't I come back in half a month?" "Sir, take care." Watching the customer leave, the shop assistant's face showed a polite but not awkward smile. "It's over?" He walked in front of a manager and said, "If they all come back in half a month, we will lose a lot." Although the manager was also extremely nervous, he still comforted him. "This is only the first day, you have to believe in miss." The second day, all the clothes in the shop were 20% off. There were more customers entering the shop than yesterday, but still no one was willing to buy. The third day, the fourth day, all the clothes and fabrics were sold at 30% off. There were more customers entering the shop and a few people were willing to buy, but it was only a small number. Several shops added up only sold a dozen pieces. The Liu family. Early in the morning, when the sky was just beginning to brighten, the two women met again at the entrance of the shop. One of them looked at the other and said, "Didn't we agree to come together the day after tomorrow?" The other woman looked embarrassed. "I'm just here to take a look." The woman was silent for a moment before she asked, "Don't tell me you're going to snatch that fairy dress from me. I saw you looking at it for a long time yesterday." The other woman said unhappily, "What do you mean by yours? It belongs to whoever gets it first." Behind them, the crowd had already blocked the entire street. "Open the door. It's already so late. Open the door." "That's right. This is how you do business." Someone could not help but step forward and knock on the door. "Open the door. Open the door." One of the workers yawned and opened the door a little. When he opened his eyes, he was stunned. The next moment, he closed the door without hesitation. His face was filled with fear as he shouted, "Shopkeeper, something bad has happened. Someone wants to destroy our shop." You're tuning in to the Sword Dance in the Vast Sky YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.